Here's where I ask, what would you have done?
Hello, this is a short demo video to show you the 2D capabilities from Blender rigging in Grease Pencil. Look at this. You can manipulate it and it shows some animation. You have controls for the eyes and the eyeballs. For example, here you can move this and start animating this funny character. By the way, this character is part of a very old YouTube series called Soy un Zombie, which means I am a zombie, based on popular characters from Mexico.
¡Viva México, cabrones! ¡Viva México, cabrones!
Quick disclaimer, this video took 1 year for editing and 10 years to bring to surface. Why? Because the production agreements in which this show was made is still boiling waters to this day. There were production conflicts between animators, IP owners, and the production company in Mexico. Still, I don't mean to stir all conflicts by uploading this video, but rather make a homage to those incredible things that the series got right a decade ago. Yes, what you're about to see is not a modern show, but it's the most hilarious adult comedy back in 2012, before any of the adult comedy cartoons we know today in 2022. So, sit and relax, grab some chips, because I reached out to 3 artists from the legendary animation team who made this series possible, and they want to share some amazing tips for their making-ofs. If you're new to the channel, my name is Pierre Schiller. I like to bring you 2D and 3D animation production tips. Hit that subscribe button to get the latest notification uploads. No, seriously, hit that subscribe button. Jor is really angry because
83.1% of the viewers
are not subscribed. Subscribe so you can see her sculpting time-lapse video next and get the file if you want. It doesn't sound like a bad deal, does it? So, hit subscribe. Alrighty then, let's start. We're going to review this series in 3 aspects: character design and production, background design, and 3D animation. Hi Ramon, it's great to have you here. Could you tell us a bit about your experience and how you got into the Soy un Zombie project, please?
It was a great experience. A good friend with whom I had worked at Anima Studio for many years invited me to participate. In fact, almost everyone on the team had worked at Anima before. The story of I Am a Zombie seemed very interesting to me, and it gave us the opportunity to create something with the parameters of production, animation, and content that we would have liked to implement in previous projects. Now everything depended on us, and that was very striking. I think the result was very good.
How long did it take to make one episode?
I estimate that we produced around 20 or 25 chapters in total. We developed one complete episode every 2 weeks. Each episode lasted 3 to 4 minutes. Writers and animators will join in a meeting and brainstorm ideas. If it made us laugh and had good dynamics with the rest of the characters, we knew it will work in animation. From there we would record the first voice pass in half a day. Then the real voice actors will come and add more personality to their lines. We would have the sketches ready for production in a day or 2.
From your experience as a producer and animator, what was the biggest challenge at a technical level?
I think one of the challenges was to have a very streamed production method to optimize the number of episodes we were going to produce. We designed an animation process that all animators would follow to achieve homogeneity in the scenes. For me, it is very important that the characters feel alive, with all that this implies. Even if the animation is limited, the characters should feel they have weight, and that they respond to gravity. The action readings should be clear. The viewer should relate to them and stop thinking that they are drawings on the screen. We created some flash files specifically for those characters, and I worked with the animators, so that we all follow the same steps to achieve consistent animation. For example, I have a particular way to do traditional animation for lip sync, so I trained all the animators to follow the same guidelines and avoid mouth popping when working with voice animation for their characters.
Could you tell us a bit more how you started the process of creating a rigged character?
The original drawing and designs were produced by Julian Van Boers, an excellent artist. Each new character was created and tailored to the need of the story episode script. Then we would use Flash to create a rig design that was applied to all the characters. Flash creates 2D assets using symbols. We embedded some pre-planned symbols with synchronized animation to be able to handle each independent detailed movement, like the hands or eyes. In the end, everything worked very well. Corey graphed to those predefined, pre-animated symbols. This allowed us to save a lot of time, because the preset values that we gave in each level of the embedded symbols in the rig could be repeated or manipulated without affecting another part of the animation.
What was it like working with more animators for this project? Did they handle file names or controls in any way that would identify the settings or the characters?
We started with 3 animators, Roberto James, Julian Banbors, and myself, so each one named their files as they wanted as long as they indicated to which scene and sequence they belonged to. We coordinated things together since we were all in the same office room. The only thing that was done outside that room was the voice acting, but the recording studio was across the yard in the studio building property lot.
How did you handle transferring projects from one workstation to the next? How did you organize your pipeline to have an episode ready and approved?
Since we were a small team, we had a server where we uploaded the scenes, and it was enough to turn our seats around and say to Manu, who was in charge of the assembly and editing, "Hey Manu, I already uploaded scene X, you may start the compositing and post effects." This was the same workflow when I completed the storyboard and the animatic for that week's episode. I will take a couple of days sketching with the first draft audio, then I would upload it to the server once the director approved it or made adjustments to it.
How long did it take you back then to develop a 2D character complete with faces, hands, and poses ready to animate?
Not much, since we had the system that I told you about. Julian traced everything in vectors and in groups, and what each animator did was just select which groups would be inside each symbol, distribute them in layers, assign pivots, and it could be animated. The new pieces were traced, cleaned up, and colored on the fly. We knew exactly how we wanted them to look and to be composed. For example, we animated a lot of movement without changing the character's body or skull, except for the arms, which were fully animated with new pieces that the animator created for that sequence.
How do you see the development of animation after 2020 and the pandemic?
Yes, everything changed, in some things for the better and others were a bit more complicated, but today we have production systems that have allowed greater contact with artists from all over the world. On the one hand, there is more competition, but also more opportunity and learning. Very interesting projects that I probably wouldn't have had access to otherwise. Due to the initial chaos of the pandemic, we had to look elsewhere, and today, fortunately, very interesting proposals and very profitable challenges are emerging.
What productions would you say are making a change for the better in the animation field?
I think that in my case the most representative referencing 2D animation was the Klaus movie. I see it as the resurgence of an expressive, fun, and content animation. Sergio Pablo's work is an important reference. There are also many interesting and varied visual and content proposals, as well as the production process.
We agree on that after this world pandemic. Anyways, thank you for your time. Is there any advice that you would like to give for future 2D or 3D animators in the industry?
Well, the advice is just not to stop studying. The animator should not stop observing his environment to be able to represent it as best as possible, regardless of how stylized the design or content is. He should always leave the viewer with something that he can relate to as reality. Even if the product is very fanciful, grotesque, or anatomical, you always have to study. Thank you so much.
I translated this interview on behalf of everyone subscribed to my channel with very insightful information on the production of this series. The complete Spanish podcast can be listened on the URL of the video description. Thank you very much, Ramon, for the interview.
Exacto, y una cosa muy importante que también sucede con los actores es que el espectador tiene que ver un personaje que vive una situación y le causa un efecto. Y eso es lo que hace una buena animación.
Our next guest is Romy Villamil. Romy is the artist that created the backgrounds for the I Am a Zombie series. She also worked with the script writers and animators to define the look and feel of the episodes. Which software do you use to create your backgrounds, Romy?
Everything was created with Photoshop, Illustrator, and sometimes Flash. This was a workflow back in the day. These are some of the backgrounds that I designed for the series. We would plan between 6 or 7 backgrounds per episode, at the most. Ideally, we were using 4 or 5 at a time. Doing more backgrounds would require more time and the production deadline would have been difficult to complete.
What was your favorite moment of working in the series?
My favorite moment from working on the series was when we did September 15th episode, where Pena and Peach try to explain to Calderon the origin of Mexico's Independence Day. It was very funny because we had no script, absolutely nothing, and I proposed to the scriptwriter what if they asked the characters, but they have no idea what to say and they make up stupid things to answer. They greenlit the idea, and by lunchtime, we started creating the wacky dialogue, all inconsistent with the real story, mixing things from the Dark Force, the Empire, and enemies with references to Star Wars between other gags. The crew loved the jokes. Another favorite moment that I remember was when we made the hashtag It's Beania's Fault, because we also created it out of absurd things, so the characters would blame the zombie world president for everything wrong. We also wrote this one without a previous script. Everything was written on the spot, and it ended up being a hilarious episode because we all did it together. We just sat down, started talking nonsense, and it came out very original and funny.
What is your advice for artists who do background layout and design?
First, composition. Learn composition, observe real life and draw it. Master perspective and do not be afraid to create backgrounds. These are very important skills. I see that cartoonists or illustrators are generally terrified of drawing scene layouts or scene locations with architecture. I would recommend that you do not use Clip Studio Paint, just because it already includes some backgrounds that they have in the libraries. Those assets are predefined 3D models for houses or buildings. Then they trace them or use render effects to put them into their own comics. That's not being a background designer. I feel that background artists can do much more to create scenes. There are people who use SketchUp as a basis for certain structures in the background composition. Software is just a tool. If an artist relies solely on those pre-built model libraries, then they become lazy, and performance for designing and laying out backgrounds starts to drop. Using the software is not bad, but my advice is not to be confined to a single program but to investigate, study the structure, and draw the shape of the house or building structures by hand using architectural drawing. You need to handcraft scenes to understand depth, perspective, and values. Practice makes perfect. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much, Ramon and Romy, for this fantastic interview as well. If you are watching this and probably find a 2D model interesting to study using Grease Pencil in Blender, you can consider joining or following my Patreon community. I send Patreon rewards between the week of the 18th and the 26th of each month for everyone who is currently supporting my Patreon page. If you see a video on my YouTube channel, chances are the file is already available for patrons. My name is Pierre Schiller, and let me ask you something. Have you tried Blender today? Try Blender. Blender is powerful and beyond artistry compatible.